I wasn't supposed to be standing. My surgeon had looked me straight in the eye 5 days earlier and said, "Natalie, if you fall once, you could undo everything we just repaired." So I stayed exactly where he told me, flat on my back, a brace wrapped around my waist, a walker leaning against the bedroom wall, pain medications sitting untouched beside a glass of water because I hated how it made my thoughts feel slow. Then my phone buzzed. It was my husband, Owen. "Don't worry about dinner tonight." That sounded thoughtful, until another message arrived. "The family is coming over." I frowned. What family? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, one sentence arrived. "Just everyone." I counted. His parents, his older brother, his younger sister, 3 cousins, 2 uncles, 2 aunts, a niece, a nephew, 12 people. 5 days after my spine surgery. I honestly thought he was joking. I even smiled. Then I heard the front door unlock. Voices, laughter, car doors closing outside, suitcases rolling across the driveway. Suitcases. My stomach tightened. Not grocery bags, not casserole dishes. Suitcases. Heavy ones. I reached for my walker and slowly pulled myself upright. Every movement felt like someone twisting a knife behind my ribs. I made it halfway down the hallway before I heard Judith, my mother-in-law, say something that stopped me completely. "I told everyone this place has enough bedrooms. We can stay the whole week." The whole week. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had even told me. Then Owen laughed. "It's fine. Natalie won't mind. She's resting anyway." I stood there, gripping the walker so tightly my fingers hurt more than my back. Resting? How exactly was I supposed to rest with 12 overnight guests walking through my house? Someone opened the refrigerator. Someone else yelled from the kitchen, "Who's making dinner?" Another voice answered, "Well, Natalie always cooks." Silence settled over me. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I finally understood something I had been refusing to see for years. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't poor timing. This was planning. And none of them knew there was one document hidden inside the blue fireproof safe in my home office. A document Owen had never bothered to read. One sentence inside that document would change everything. But I wasn't going to tell anyone. Not yet. Because sometimes the strongest foundation isn't the one that holds a house up. It's the one that waits until everyone has stepped onto it before revealing which beams were never theirs to stand on. Welcome back to Reality Drama Story, where family secrets unfold and quiet decisions change everything. If you are new here, drop a comment and subscribe. Now let's get into it. I grew up believing that a house remembered the people who respected it. My grandfather, Leonard Brooks, used to build custom homes across northern Ohio. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. But every family in our county knew his work. When I was 10 years old, he'd let me sit beside him on unfinished floors while he explained why houses stayed standing. "People think walls carry the weight," he'd tell me. "They don't." He'd tap the wooden beams overhead. "It's the parts nobody notices." I never forgot that. Years later, I realized families worked the same way. The loudest people usually weren't carrying anything. The quiet ones were. After college, I became an interior designer. Not because I loved decorating, because I loved making old spaces feel safe again. That's how I met Owen Mercer. He was funny without trying too hard, confident without sounding arrogant. He owned a growing landscaping company and had an easy smile that made strangers feel like old friends. On our third date, he brought coffee to the renovation site where I was working. On our sixth date, he stayed until midnight helping me move furniture after a contractor canceled. On our first anniversary, he handed me a small silver key. "For our future house," he said. Back then, it felt romantic. Now I realize he never said whose house it would really become. We married 2 years later. Nothing extravagant, just close friends, a small church, A backyard reception. My grandfather hugged Owen before the ceremony. "Take care of my granddaughter," he whispered. Owen nodded. "I always will." At least I think he believed those words when he said them. Life settled into routines. Morning coffee. Long workdays. Weekend projects. We laughed more than we argued. Whenever his family visited, they stayed for dinner. Then dinner became weekends. Weekends became holidays. Eventually, holidays became entire weeks. Every visit grew slightly longer. Every boundary became slightly smaller. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't generous enough. Maybe I cared too much about schedules. Maybe families were simply louder than the one I grew up with. Judith always had opinions. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She could criticize someone while smiling warmly. "Natalie, your mashed potatoes are wonderful." Pause. My mother always added fresh cream. Little things. Constant things. Tiny paper cuts instead of deep wounds. Grant, Owen's older brother, treated our garage like a free storage unit. Melissa borrowed kitchen appliances and forgot to return them. One cousin started sending online packages to our address because it was more convenient. Every single favor sounded temporary. Somehow none of them ever ended. Owen usually shrugged. "Their family." I accepted that answer longer than I should have. Until one Thanksgiving, my grandmother's china had been sitting safely inside a glass cabinet for nearly 20 years. When dinner ended, I noticed one plate missing. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody asked. Weeks later, I found it at Melissa's house. She laughed. "Oh, I thought nobody used those anymore." She didn't apologize. She simply handed it back. The crack running across the center hadn't been there before. I remember holding that broken plate in silence. Not because of the porcelain, because something else had cracked too. Trust rarely breaks all at once. It fractures quietly, one ignored moment at a time. Still, I stayed. I convinced myself marriage meant compromise. That families were messy. That patience solved everything. Then my back injury happened. It started with one heavy cabinet during a renovation project. A sharp pain. A doctor's appointment. Then an MRI. Finally surgery. The recovery would take months. The surgeon was clear. No bending. No lifting. No stairs unless necessary. No hosting. He actually laughed when he said the last one. I laughed too. Neither of us imagined my husband would invite 12 relatives into the house less than a week later. As I stood in the hallway listening to suitcase wheels roll across hardwood floors, another sound caught my attention. Grant's voice. "So, where are we sleeping?" Owen answered immediately. "We'll figure it out." Figure it out. Inside my house. Without asking me, I looked toward the office door at the end of the hallway. Inside that room sat the blue fireproof safe. Inside the safe rested a folder dated March 18, 2022. A folder almost no one knew existed, especially not Owen. And for the first time since our wedding day, I decided to stop correcting people who assumed everything inside this house belonged to both of us. Because the truth was far more complicated. The first night felt less like my home and more like a hotel I hadn't agreed to open. I lay awake listening to footsteps above my bedroom. Someone laughed in the hallway at 11:47 p.m. A bathroom door slammed. Then another. At 1:12 a.m., I heard the washing machine start. At 2:03 a.m., someone dropped what sounded like a cast iron pan in my kitchen. Every noise sent a jolt through my back. Pain wasn't only physical anymore. It was the feeling that my recovery had become less important than everyone else's convenience. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon. For a brief moment, I smiled. Maybe Owen had realized how overwhelmed I was. Maybe he was making breakfast. Then I heard Judith's voice. "There's only one carton of eggs left. Natalie really needs to shop more often." I stared at the ceiling. There had been 4 cartons before my surgery. Grant walked into the bedroom without knocking. "Morning," he said. coffee mug in hand. His eyes drifted around the room. "You still in bed?" I blinked. "I'm recovering from spinal surgery." "Right." He nodded casually. "I forgot." Forgot. 5 days after surgery. He forgot. Before I could answer, he walked away, leaving my bedroom door open behind him. Around noon, Owen finally came upstairs carrying a bowl of soup. He smiled as if everything were perfectly normal. "How are you feeling?" I looked at him for a long moment. "How many people are staying here?" 12. "For how long?" He hesitated. "Maybe 6 days. Maybe." He couldn't even give me an exact answer. "You invited them without asking me." "I didn't think you'd mind." "You didn't think?" "I thought family would help." I looked toward the doorway where laughter echoed downstairs. "Who's helping?" He didn't answer. Instead, he set the soup on the bedside table. "You should focus on healing." Then he walked away. The irony almost made me laugh. By the third day, our refrigerator looked empty. Our pantry had been picked clean. The electric bill notification appeared on my phone. Water usage had nearly doubled. Someone had moved furniture in the living room without asking. My favorite reading chair had disappeared. Later, I found it on the patio with muddy footprints across the cushion. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody apologized. It simply became another thing I quietly cleaned up. Or would have cleaned up, if I had been physically able. That afternoon, my physical therapist, Dr. Hannah Cole, arrived for my scheduled home visit. She stopped inside the entryway. There were children's shoes everywhere. Suitcases lined the walls. Someone had left pizza boxes stacked beside the staircase. She looked confused. "I thought you were supposed to be recovering." "So did I." She helped me through gentle stretching exercises. Halfway through the session, she lowered her voice. "Natalie." I looked up. "Stress slows healing." "I know." "No." She paused. "I mean medically." She glanced toward the hallway where loud voices echoed again. "Your body doesn't know the difference between emotional stress and physical danger." I closed my eyes. I already knew. That evening, I heard something that made my stomach tighten. Grant was talking in the dining room. "I don't know why Owen worries." Another relative laughed. "This place will probably be ours someday anyway." The room exploded with quiet chuckles. Someone added, "They don't even have kids." Another voice answered, "So who else would inherit it?" My heart became strangely calm, not angry. Calm, because every single assumption they were making rested on one belief: that this house belonged equally to Owen. It didn't. Not even close. The truth went back 4 years. After my grandfather Leonard passed away, I inherited the property. Not jointly. Not partially. Entirely. His attorney insisted on one condition before transferring ownership. He called it protection. At the time, I thought it sounded unnecessary. Now it sounded brilliant. He had included a separate ownership agreement. The document was signed on March 18, 2022, recorded 2 weeks later. Everything had been handled legally before Owen, and I refinanced the roof repairs. The agreement stated something very specific: the property, the land, the structure, every permanent improvement remained my separate inherited asset. No transfer, no implied ownership, no automatic marital conversion, even if we remained married for decades. Owen had signed every refinancing document without reading the attached inheritance clause. His attorney had advised him to review everything carefully. He hadn't. He trusted paperwork the same way he trusted tomorrow, by assuming it would always work itself out. That blue folder inside my office safe contained more than property records. It held inspection reports, bank statements, construction invoices, every dollar spent renovating the home after Grandpa passed away. Nearly 80% had come directly from my inheritance account. The remaining amount came from my design business. None came from Owen's landscaping company. Not because he refused, because I insisted on preserving Grandpa's legacy exactly as it had been left to me. Back then, Owen had thanked me for taking financial pressure off our marriage. No, he barely remembered those conversations. That evening, my neighbor, Evelyn Ross, knocked gently on the front door. She carried homemade chicken soup. When she stepped inside, she froze. "I thought you said your husband was taking care of you." "So did I." She quietly handed me the container. As she looked around the crowded house, I noticed her expression change. Not judgment, concern, real concern. She squeezed my hand before leaving. "If you need anything, call me." Simple words, but they stayed with me long after she drove away. If this story is hitting close, drop a comment and stay with me, because what happens next is something none of them were ready for. The next morning brought another surprise. I woke to unfamiliar voices inside my office. My office, where the blue safe sat behind a framed architectural print. I slowly stood. Every step hurt. Halfway down the hallway, I heard Grant laughing. "We could turn this room into another bedroom." Someone answered. "Move the desk." Another voice asked, "What's behind that picture?" Silence. Then footsteps. Closer. Closer to the wall. Closer to the safe. I stopped outside the partially open door. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing, because I realized something. They weren't looking for memories. They were making plans. Plans for a house they believed would one day belong to them. And none of them, not Owen, not Judith, not Grant, not anyone standing inside that room, had the slightest idea that one signature made years earlier had already determined exactly who would walk away with those walls. I stayed completely silent. Sometimes the strongest move isn't stopping people from making a mistake. It's allowing them to reveal exactly how far they're willing to go before the truth arrives. I stayed in the hallway for almost a full minute. No one knew I was there. The office door was open just enough for me to hear every word. Grant chuckled. "If Owen ever decides to sell this place, I'd turn this room into a game room." Melissa answered almost immediately. "Sell it. Why would he? This house is worth at least $900,000 now." Another cousin laughed. "He could split the money with family." Nobody corrected them. Not even Owen. He simply stood there, saying nothing. That silence hurt more than anything anyone had actually said. I quietly stepped back into my bedroom before anyone noticed me. For years, I had believed silence protected peace. Now I understood something different. Sometimes silence protects the people causing the damage. I wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. I wanted everyone to finish showing me exactly who they were. Later that afternoon, Owen finally came upstairs. He knocked once before entering. "You disappeared." I was resting. He sat on the chair beside the bed. "You seem distant." I almost smiled. "I've had spinal surgery." "I know." "No." I looked directly at him. "You know I had surgery. You don't know what recovery feels like." He rubbed the back of his neck. "The family's only trying to spend time together. 12 overnight guests. They don't see each other often. And I don't recover from spine surgery often." For the first time in days, he didn't have an answer. Instead, he changed the subject. "Grant thinks we should remodel the upstairs." "We?" The word landed heavily. "Really?" "Yeah. He has some ideas." I nodded slowly. "I'm sure he does." That evening I called someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 8 months. Daniel Pierce, the attorney who had handled my grandfather Leonard Brooks's estate. He answered on the second ring. "Natalie, it's been a while. I was wondering when I'd hear from you." His calm voice hadn't changed. "I have a question." "Go ahead." "If people assume my inherited property belongs to my husband, it doesn't." "I know, but I want to hear you say it." He paused only briefly. "The deed hasn't changed. The inheritance agreement hasn't changed. The recorded ownership hasn't changed. You remain the sole legal owner." I closed my eyes. What if someone starts making plans for the house? As long as you haven't transferred ownership, they're only making assumptions. I thanked him. Before hanging up, He asked one unexpected question. Is everything all right? I looked toward the bedroom door. No, it isn't. Would you like me to prepare certified copies of everything? Yes. I think it's time. I'll have them ready tomorrow. The following morning began with another surprise. Two moving boxes sat near the staircase. They weren't mine. Neither was the tape. I slowly walked downstairs. Judith noticed me first. Oh, good. She smiled warmly. We're organizing. Organizing what? The upstairs closets. I looked toward the boxes. My closets? They're shared closets. No, I answered quietly. They aren't. Her smile faded just enough for me to notice. Oh, sweetheart. She laughed softly. Marriage means sharing. I nodded. Some things. She tilted her head. Not everything. While everyone busied themselves carrying boxes from room to room, I watched carefully. Nobody asked permission. Nobody even paused. It was as if my presence had become optional inside my own home. Melissa opened a linen cabinet. Grant measured a guest bedroom with his phone. One cousin searched online for bunk beds. Another discussed repainting the hallway. Every conversation assumed permanence. Every plan ignored me. I counted. In less than 20 minutes, I heard the phrase, when we, spoken 11 times. When we remodel. When we replace the floors. When we visit next summer. When we store our camper. When we finish the basement. Not once did anyone ask, what does Natalie want? That afternoon, Evelyn Ross knocked again. She brought fresh bread from the local bakery. When she stepped inside, her eyes widened. Were there always this many people? No. She lowered her voice. Can we talk outside? I nodded. Slowly, carefully. I followed her onto the front porch. She waited until the door closed behind us. I've lived next door for 14 years. I know. I've watched families fall apart. I looked at her quietly. The strange part? They almost never collapse because of one big betrayal. They collapse because everyone convinces themselves that little acts of disrespect don't matter. Her words stayed with me, because that was exactly what had happened. No single moment had destroyed my marriage. Thousands of tiny moments had. When I returned inside, I heard laughter coming from the dining room. Grant had unfolded a county property map on the table. He pointed toward our backyard. If Owen buys the neighboring lot someday, someone interrupted. He should build rental cabins. Another relative added. That'll stay in the family forever. I noticed Owen smiling politely. He wasn't agreeing, but he wasn't correcting them either. Sometimes agreement isn't spoken. Sometimes it's simply allowed. Late that evening, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel Pierce. I have the certified copies. Already? I also found something else while reviewing your file. What? A letter. I don't remember a letter. It was sealed with the estate documents. Your grandfather asked that you read it only if you ever questioned whether protecting the house was the right decision. I felt my throat tighten. I forgot it existed. I'll bring it tomorrow. After we hung up, I stared at the dark bedroom ceiling. Grandpa Leonard had anticipated something. Years before any of this happened, he had left me one final message. I couldn't imagine why, but I had a feeling the answer would change the way I saw everything. The next morning, I watched from my bedroom window as Daniel Pierce's black sedan pulled into the driveway. At almost the same moment, Grant looked outside. Oh, he frowned. Who's the lawyer? The laughter downstairs stopped. Even Owen looked toward the front door. Nobody knew why an estate attorney was visiting. Nobody knew what he was carrying. And nobody, not one person in that crowded house, realized that the envelope in Daniel's briefcase had been waiting for this exact day for more than 4 years. I took a slow breath, adjusted my back brace, and walked toward the front door. For the first time since my surgery, I wasn't walking because someone needed me. I was walking because the foundation of every lie in that house was finally about to be tested. Daniel Pierce stepped inside carrying a slim black briefcase. The house, which had been filled with chatter just seconds earlier, became strangely quiet. He looked at me first. Natalie. Good morning, Daniel. Then he looked around the room. I hope I'm not interrupting. No, I said calmly. You've arrived at exactly the right time. Grant folded the county map and slid it aside. Judith smiled politely. And you are? Daniel Pierce. He extended his hand. I represented Leonard Brooks's estate. The smile on Judith's face faded ever so slightly. I noticed it. So did Evelyn Ross, who had stopped by after seeing Daniel's car pull into the driveway. She quietly remained near the front door. Daniel placed a sealed envelope on the dining table. I was asked to deliver this if Natalie ever questioned whether protecting this property had been the right decision. Nobody spoke. Then he removed another folder. This one was much thicker. Blue. Exactly like the one inside my office safe. Grant leaned forward. What's all this? Daniel answered without emotion. Recorded property documents. Melissa laughed nervously. Why would anyone need property papers today? Daniel looked at her. Because assumptions often become expensive. Owen finally spoke. I don't understand. Daniel opened the folder. The residence located at 1847 Hawthorne Lane was transferred solely to Natalie Brooks through the estate of Leonard Brooks. He slid the deed across the table. The transfer was recorded on March 31, 2022. Silence. Daniel continued. The inheritance remained separate property under a recorded ownership agreement signed during refinancing. He looked directly at Owen. You signed acknowledgement forms. Owen frowned. I thought those were loan documents. They included loan documents. Daniel nodded. They also included the inheritance protection clause. Owen's face lost its color. I never realized. I know. Grant stood. Hold on. He pointed toward the walls. Owen has lived here for years. Correct, Daniel answered. That doesn't change ownership. Judith interrupted. They're married. They are. Then it's their house. Daniel calmly shook his head. Legally. No. He turned another page. The land. The structure. Permanent improvements. Future appreciation. Remain Natalie Brooks's separate inherited property. The room became perfectly still. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody talked about remodeling. Nobody discussed future vacations. The confidence that had filled the house all week disappeared in seconds. Then came the part one hadn't expected. Judith turned toward Owen. You never told us. I didn't know. You should have known. Grant slammed his hand against the table. So we've been making plans for nothing? Owen looked exhausted. I never promised anyone this house. No. I finally spoke. You simply never corrected them. Everyone turned toward me. I stayed standing despite the pain in my back. Slowly, carefully, I listened. For 5 days. I listened while people assigned bedrooms. I listened while people discussed renovations. I listened while my recovery became an inconvenience. Nobody interrupted. I counted. 12 overnight guests. 5 sleepless nights. 11 conversations about changing my house. 0 conversations asking how I was healing. The numbers hung in the air. No one argued with them. Because they were true. Grant crossed his arms. So what? You going to throw everyone out? His voice carried frustration more than anger. I answered calmly. No. I'm asking everyone to leave by 6 o'clock this evening. Melissa looked shocked. Seriously? Yes. Judith tried another approach. Natalie. We're family. I nodded. Family doesn't require permission to visit. It requires respect. The room stayed silent. Then Judith's tone softened. We didn't realize. You realized enough to unpack suitcases. No one answered. Owen walked toward me. I'm sorry. His voice was quiet. I honestly thought everyone would help. I searched his face. For years, I would have accepted those words immediately. This time, I asked one question. Who helped me? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, because he couldn't name a single person. Just then, Arthur Benson, my grandfather's longtime friend, and the retired contractor who had helped build part of the house decades earlier, stepped in through the open front door. Evelyn had called him after seeing the tension growing. Arthur looked around slowly. I figured I'd find everyone here. He rested one weathered hand on the back of a dining chair. I helped Leonard frame this house. His voice was calm. He used to tell me something. Everyone listened. A home doesn't belong to the person who talks the loudest. He smiled gently. It belongs to the one who protects it when nobody else will. Then he looked directly at Owen. Your wife needed protection this week. You gave her company. Those aren't the same thing. No one challenged him. Daniel slid the sealed envelope toward me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandpa Leonard. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. I recognized his handwriting immediately. I read only part of it aloud. Natalie, if you're reading this, someone has probably mistaken your kindness for surrender. Remember, this house was never meant to make people comfortable. It was meant to keep you safe. Protecting what I built is not selfish. It's gratitude. I couldn't continue for a moment. I folded the letter carefully. The room remained silent. By 5:42 p.m., the first suitcase rolled across the porch. By 5:51, another. At exactly 6:03 p.m., the driveway was empty. 12 relatives had arrived believing they belonged there. 12 relatives left understanding they had confused generosity with ownership. Only Owen remained. He stood in the living room. The house felt unfamiliar in its quietness. I'm ashamed. I know. I don't expect forgiveness today. I know. I want to earn it. For the first time in days, I believed he was speaking honestly. But honesty isn't the same as repair. Over the next 94 days, we lived separately. He attended marriage counseling alone before asking me to join. He never once asked about the house. Not once. Instead, he asked about my recovery, my physical therapy, my pain, the things he should have noticed from the beginning. Trust didn't return all at once. It returned appointment by appointment, conversation by conversation, choice by choice. 6 months later, I walked through the backyard without my brace. Arthur had repaired Grandpa's old wooden garden bench as a gift. I sat there holding Leonard's letter. The evening breeze moved gently through the maple trees. The house was quiet again, not because it was empty, because peace had finally come home. This wasn't revenge. It was the simple mathematics of respect, because every relationship is built on what people believe they can take without asking. If this story reminded you to know your worth, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, drop a comment, and I will see you in the next one.